Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're making vegan meatballs out of pinto beans. The recipe comes from chocolatecoveredkatie.com and it calls for 1 can of pinto beans or black beans, and I had dried pinto beans. So I cooked half a cup of dried pinto beans. No, actually, sorry, 3/4 cup of dried pinto beans to get a full can cooked. Now that the beans are drained and rinsed off, I am adding the spices. You'll be adding a half teaspoon of salt and a half teaspoon of garlic powder. And the recipe also called for some Italian flavors, so I don't really have Italian seasoning aside from oregano and thyme, so I'm adding a 1/4 teaspoon of those. I also added a 1/4 teaspoon of onion powder. The recipe called for a half a cup of chopped onion, which would have definitely tasted better like real onions, but I didn't have any and I did not want to go shopping for this. So this is my secret ingredient, or not so secret ingredient. I'm adding Kitchen Bouquet, which is a kind of a beef flavored broth. It's supposed to darken the color of what you cook, but it also adds a little bit of a flavor to it as well. The recipe calls for a 1/3 cup of oat flour or almond flour. I had these breadcrumbs to use up, and so I wanted to just go ahead and do that instead. If you need a gluten-free option, definitely go for the flours that are mentioned on Chocolate Covered Katie. And then I'm going to stir everything, and then in a minute I'll be adding it to the food processor. You may have noticed that the title card called this spaghetti, even though the picture showed penne pasta. I just do that sometimes. I will sometimes just say spaghetti instead of pasta, even though it's totally wrong, and it's because of the algorithm. So throw everything into a food processor. If you don't have one, I'm pretty sure you can get the same result by mashing up the bean concoction with one of those 5-pointed asterisk looking pulverizers. I didn't want to call it a meat masher, but that's pretty much what everybody uses them for. Although not you if you're vegan. So you can smash them up. The recipe also says not to make it too thin or too pulverized, so you kind of do want some visible beans in it. I don't think it matters. I think I'd rather not see visible beans in mine, or not taste a large chunk of bean. And my food processor isn't working so great. I think we need a new blade. One reason I wanted to make this recipe was because there's very few ingredients in it. I'm a huge fan of minimal ingredient cooking. I don't know what you would call it. The books, back when people had cookbooks, used to call it like 5-ingredient recipes, 4-ingredient recipes, 3-ingredient recipes, which I don't know what that would be. Mayonnaise on bread. So I'm really a big fan of cooking that way. And here is a little trick I wanted to show you, at least on the Kroger pasta boxes. That first white line will be an indicator for half the pasta in the box. That box contains 16 ounces of pasta, and I'm going to be using 8 ounces for this recipe because most recipes that I find require only 8 ounces at a time. And over the years of shopping at Kroger and measuring out pasta on this scale, I've figured out that the line shows you where half the box is. So if you'll see now, I'll tilt it so that you can kind of see where the pasta gets dark and the air starts. That's exactly where that white line is, so ta-da. And then throw a bunch of water in the pot and go ahead and boil that. Now we're going to cook the bean balls. I'm going to use some canola oil on a skillet and let it heat up. The original recipe does tell you to stick this in the oven at 350. That's not my thing. I don't like doing that with meat unless, well, it's not even meat. I just don't like doing that for a lot of recipes that say throw something in the oven. I like to be able to turn the food better, and also like when it's in the oven, it might not get that little char, which is kind of what I was looking for. In my bean burger recipe, that original recipe actually also said to stick it in the oven, which was weird to me. I think people make burgers on top of the stove and on the grill where there's flame. So I don't really know what the deal was with that. When you do it this way, you do get kind of a burned appearance on the outside of it, which is what I like. I think you could possibly also achieve that if you happen to have an air fryer and spray the entire thing with oil, which was not in the original recipe, so they should have added that. So if you wanted to stick them in the oven to make it easier on yourself, do it if you've got a convection oven or an air fryer, and spray all of the meatball exterior with oil. Here's a shot of that char that I'm going for, and then I'll turn them. And then since these are round, you kind of want to try not just turning it, once to coat two sides. Try to coat more than two sides to get the char on all, like 3 or 4 sides if you can.
Been a long time since I met someone who encouraged more than a few days. Oh, before our first time, but I still don't trust your intentions. You don't even know me, not yet to mention. I swear to God, every time I try,
I could be wrong, but I think the oil plays an important part in getting that char appearance and texture. So that is one reason why I am spraying them kind of a lot.
on my place, my precious place. But maybe I could make a little room for you, either up to spill your secrets to, pour some more onto us so I don't have to think about all my.
Covering the pan might not have been necessary here, but I like to do it just to sometimes make it quieter in the kitchen. So the bean balls are all done, and I'm going to take them out because I'm using this skillet to make the spaghetti sauce.
Maybe I could make a little room for us, bake all my hopes into a bed of trust.
I got 14 meatballs out of this, and the recipe does say it yields 14 to 16 depending on the size of the balls. So I'm also going to throw in some ground beef, which is soy protein. This is textured vegetable protein and frozen in ground beef crumble looking stuff. I think I put about a cup in the skillet. I didn't want to use the whole bag because I have plans for this for another recipe coming up. And I wanted to add this because I do like the taste. And then it's one of those foods that you have to just add seasoning to really make it pop, and it kind of absorbs. Soy is a good food for absorbing flavors of anything else. So whatever you want it to taste like, get a flavor that tastes like it, and then that's it. That's why it's used for meat substitutes. So I want it to taste like Cajun food. So I threw that on. I used to buy a tomato sauce or pasta sauce in a jar that came with, what did they call it? Meat sauce. It came with little meat particles in it. And so I was trying to replicate that with this, and that's why I threw in the textured vegetable protein ground beef. So now I'm making spaghetti sauce using a can of diced tomatoes. I forget which recipe of mine it was, but I had mentioned in another recipe where I was using diced tomatoes that I found canned diced tomatoes very versatile. You can use them to make, well, they can just be an accessory in any food, really, like just a regular ingredient, or they can be salsa, or they can be pasta sauce. So I threw it in the food processor to try to liquefy it. And I will admit right now that I think the food processor just wasn't sharp enough. Um, it looks liquidy enough here and saucy enough, pasta saucy enough, but then when I added it to the textured vegetable protein, it kind of got absorbed in all the soy, and it was a very thick sauce and not too thin and spaghetti-ish. So what I should have done and recommend that you do is to put it in a blender. I've got a Vitamix that can liquefy most anything. So I think I'll do that next time instead of buying pasta sauce that can only be used for really like one thing. You're making pasta. This is what your pasta sauce is for. I'll grant you pizza too. I can get canned diced tomatoes and have a few different options of what that food or that ingredient can actually make. And if I throw it in the Vitamix, then I've got pasta sauce almost as good as anything you'd get in the store. You'd have to add your own spices, obviously, but that's part of the fun of cooking. So these are homemade sun-dried tomatoes that I had extra. A friend of mine gave me some tomatoes and I sliced them up and stuck them in the oven at a low temperature to try to sun dry them. I didn't do a very good job of drying them out. But then I used them in my salad, and then I finished my salad and had all these freaking tomatoes left. So I knew I was going to put it in this recipe. I should have probably stuck it in the food processor with the other stuff, but I thought, whatever, if it's chunky, who cares? And then I'm adding some Italian seasoning, same stuff we added to the bean balls. I'm just using it to taste, or I'm just kind of eyeballing. And I'm adding some Cajun stuff because why not? So here's the finished meal with the spaghetti sauce and the pasta and the bean balls. I don't know what else to call them. It looks pretty good. So the bean balls do hold their shape when you cut them. I know there was no binder like an egg or anything in here to kind of hold the fake meat together. So that was a concern of mine, but they do hold their shape. And I think I would maybe add a little bit more flavoring and a seasoning, but it was really good.
That's a spicy meatball.
It's okay, I can do that accent. I'm Italian. So I hope you enjoyed this recipe. Like, share, and subscribe. It is very good. And happy eating!